the 23rd juz, and in the recitation we covered Surah Sad and part of Surah Zumar, and prior to that Surah Safat and the completion of Surah Yasin. I want to focus in today on the story of Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam, which is mentioned in a few places in the Quran, uh, particularly in Surah Al-Anbiya and here in Surah Sad. And there are certain words or sentences in Surah Sad that are the mind of a person who's reading those particular verses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He addresses the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and He tells him, وَاذْكُرْ عَبْدَنَا أَيُّوبَ, remember our slave Ayub. إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الشَّيْطَانُ بِنُصْبٍ وَعَذَابٍ, when he called out to his Lord that the shaitan has touched me with tiredness, fatigue, and punishment. So prior to actually explaining what this means, we need to know the background of what actually happened to Ayub alayhi salam. Yesterday I touched on the very important aspect of sabr and patience that we're supposed to have as Muslims, and what has been taught to us by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But Ayub alayhi salam was the embodiment of patience and sabr. What happened to him, that he was a healthy, wealthy individual with a lot of money and property and farms and children and a family. And all of a sudden, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested him with a type of illness, a skin disease that made everybody desert him. Even his own children deserted him. So much so that nobody was left except for a wife of his who treated him and took care of him and who stood by him. So, if you can imagine the toil that that kind of situation takes upon a person, that who and he is on the pinnacle of having everything that a person could desire, but all of a sudden everything is taken away from him. So much so that even his uh, dear and near people, near and dear people to him, his children, they desert him. And it's even mentioned in some riwayat that they actually took him to the edge of the village and left him to basically be on his own. So the only person that remained with him in that type of situation was his wife. So for many years, he endured this difficulty, this skin disease, and the pain that was associated with it. So the Quran doesn't specify what the illness was, but if you look at the Bible, it is mentioned that he had sore boils all over his body from the top of his head to his feet. So this was the illness, and people thought that it was contagious. So basically, they deserted him. So this verse that I've just recited to you, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes Ayub alayhi salam making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying that the shaitan has touched me with tiredness and a punishment. So what does this mean? Does the shaitan have the ability to physically affect a person? So the scholars say, no, this is not what is meant by this verse. What is meant is that Ayub alayhi salam, when he's going through all of this difficulty, when he's lost everything and he's going through physical pain, he's enduring everything, all of his loved ones have walked out upon him, there is the shaitan whispering into him and trying to put into him despair from his Lord, despair from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that how can I worship that Allah who put me through such difficulty. So this did not happen to Ayyub alayhi salam, but he was afraid that the shaitan might be able to compel him and push him and put things into his heart that would show ingratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After all, the prophets were human beings, but they were the best examples of human beings, and he, alayhi salatu wasalam, did not slip up and fall prey to the wiles of the shaitan, but he was afraid that that might happen as a human being, so he reflected this in his dua. Otherwise, Ayub alayhi salam was the embodiment of patience and sabr, and he showed this in how he dealt with this situation. Now, after all of these years of trouble, now just you can imagine first that how, as a human being, the the toll that that would take upon a person, a person's mental health and physical health, that when he's going through all this difficulty. But he endured the pain, and after enduring it for so many years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him what the cure was, which is mentioned in the next ayah, Urkud birijlik, hada mukhtasarun baridun wa sharab. Stamp your foot on the ground, and a spring will come forth, which will be the water that you're going to use to bathe yourself, and you're going to drink it, and this will be a cure for you. And ultimately, this is what happened. A spring was given to Ayub alayhi salam. He bathed in it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through this water, cured him, and he became a healthy person again. And then what happened after that? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returned him back to his former glory that he had. The same wealth, the same power, the same health, the same family. In fact, his family multiplied even more than it was before. وَوَهَبْنَا لَهُ أَهْلَهُ وَمِثْلَهُمْ مَعَهُمْ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا وَذِكْرَى لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that his family became مِثْلَهُمْ مَعَنَا, meaning family doubled, it increased, put us through these tests. But for the most part, what happens is that after a person is patient and he endures it, what happens is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he takes him out of that test, he becomes better than he was in the situation before. He becomes in a better financial situation, a better health situation, and a better situation overall when he is patient, just like Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam was. So this is the very briefly summarized story of Ayub alayhi salam, and we should not misunderstand what that first verse means about his prayer and his dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the shaitan has touched me and the shaitan is influencing me. There was no such thing as an influence of the shaitan. Ayub alayhi salam was simply afraid that he would fall into despair, and the shaitan was putting whispers into his heart that, look, your Lord has deserted you and he's rejected you and you're going through so many difficulties. So he was afraid that that would happen. Now finally, there's one more point that I'd like to make, which is the last verse, the next verse after this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam, وَخُذْ بِيَدِكَ ضِغْفًا فَاضْرِبْ بِهِ وَلَا تَحْنَثْ إِنَّا وَجَدْنَاهُ صَابِرًا نِعْمَ الْعَبْدِ إِنَّهُ أَوَّابٌ. Take in your hand dighf. Dighf means straws, and hit with that, and do not break your oath. So what happened once in the course of his illness, he became frustrated a little bit with his wife. And in that frustration, he took an oath that he was going to punish her and give her 100 lashes. And he swore by Allah that he would do it. So that oath was still remaining, and he had not yet fulfilled the oath. And it was in his mind that what should he do about that? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him a way out. And that was that he was to take a broom, and if you've seen in our countries, a broom is made up of straws which are tied together with a rope or a string. And that broom, it had 100 straws in it. And he was to use that broom and strike his wife one time, and that would be equivalent to 100 strokes of a whip. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَضْرِبْ بِهِ, take this dighf, this bundle of straws, and hit your wife with it, and fulfill your oath. And then finally Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّا وَجَدْنَاهُ صَابِرًا. We found Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam to be a sabir, a person who embodied sabr. he was a person who it was entitled to have the name Sabir. Ni'am al-abd. He was a wonderful and a beautiful slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Innahu awab. And he kept returning back again and again to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, he, in the course of his illness, in the course of his difficulties, he never despaired from the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he kept returning back to him. Now, these verses, especially the end, is in stark contrast to how Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam is depicted in the Bible. In the book of Job, it's mentioned that in the beginning, it is mentioned that he was a very upright and his character was patient and so on. But after that, after he gets the illness, verse after verse after verse talks about him complaining and saying bad things about his illness and not accepting the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this shows that the Bible in its current day and form, it is not from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because a prophet does not stoop to that level of regular human beings. His character should be the embodiment of perfection in his obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes him as sabir. He was a sabir, a person who embodied, and he was the epitome of patience. This was who Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam was. Now, relating to the last part that I said about Ayub alayhi salam fulfilling his oath by hitting his wife with one stroke, which had 100 straws in it. This concept was also taken by the Prophet ﷺ when he sometimes gave a punishment to a person who was deserving of a punishment, but he was too weak to take that punishment. It was implemented by the Prophet ﷺ. So, for example, if a person is deserving of 100 whips, according to the Quranic teachings, and the person is too sick to take that punishment, and he might die by taking that punishment, the Prophet ﷺ used this method to give that punishment as was instructed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam. So anyway, the summary is that if we want to see sabr in action, this is a person whose story we need to turn to, the story of Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam, who through his actions showed truly what a patient person is supposed to be. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us tawfiq to understand and practice what has been said and heard.